Rauter, some German bigwig, recently gave a speech. All Jews must be out of the occupied German territories before July the 1st. These poor people are being shipped off to filthy slaughterhouses like a herd of sick and neglected cattle. But I'll say no more on the subject. My own thoughts give me nightmares. Those were the words of Anne Frank, who was living in the shadows in the Netherlands, and she mentioned a man who was known for his brutality and evil, Hans Rauter. Rauter was a notorious Nazi leader who operated inside of the Netherlands, which were occupied by the Germans, and his bosses were the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, and Arthur Seyss-Inquart. He was someone who rounded up people to be sent to concentration camps, and he would condemn many people to death. But Rauter himself, 4 years after the war had come to an end, was led out to face a firing squad, and he was shot for his crimes inside of the Netherlands. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Hans Rauter was born in Klagenfurt on the 4th of February 1895, and he had a normal early life, attending high school, and he then attended university to train to become an engineer. But as the First World War broke out, he wanted to serve on the front lines and joined up the fight with the Austro-Hungarian army. He was at the end of the conflict discharged, and he had risen to the rank of Oberleutnant. He was a member of the Freikorps, the right-wing paramilitaries, who were disaffected with the politics of the Weimar government in Germany, as they had signed the Treaty of Versailles, and many believed they had betrayed the German people. But let's remember that Hans Albin Rauter was an Austrian, but he became influenced by the Nazis, and he then began to look towards the political party for guidance. He first met Hitler personally in Munich in August 1926, but Rauter would later join the Nazi party cause in Austria, and he helped to spread the Nazi politics inside of the land, but the party had been banned. In 1933 he joined the SA, Hitler's brown shirts, and continued to conduct illegal political activities inside of Austria. The SA valued him, and he was promoted, and he then in February 1935 became a member of the SS, Heinrich Himmler's paramilitaries. Inside of the group he obtained the rank of SS Oberführer, but then within a year of joining he was transferred to the SS main office and was assigned to the personal staff of the Reichsführer SS, the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. As the Second World War broke out and the Nazis began to look for people to instigate their policies and rules onto the lands they would occupy, men such as Hans Rauter were selected to be sent to occupied lands to persecute and cause a huge amount of suffering. Rauter was appointed the position of the General Commissioner for Security and the higher SS police leader in the occupied Netherlands. On the 15th of May 1940, Dutch forces surrendered and the Dutch government and royal family fled to London, and the country remained under Nazi occupation. It was very rough, and it was believed that around 70% of the country's Jewish population were killed during World War II because of the administration that was brought in. Rauter was the highest-ranking SS leader in the country, and he answered to Heinrich Himmler and the Reich Commissioner Seyss-Inquart, a man who was executed following the Nuremberg trials. Rauter in his job was responsible for the deportation of 110,000 Dutch Jews to the concentration camps, and he was also involved in crushing the Dutch resistance. Rauter would also have 300,000 Dutch men deported to Germany to work inside of slave labour programs, but he dealt with people brutally. The resistance began to organise strikes, and on the 26th of February 1941, he had a strike dealt with ruthlessly, and 9 people were killed by his forces, and Rauter declared a state of emergency and rounded up strikers and had many more executed. But he was known for his terror, and he was comparable to men such as Reinhard Heydrich in his brutality. The SS, under Rauter's control, set up concentration camps and other sites of imprisonment, and thousands were deported and hundreds were killed in these sites. Camps such as Amersfoort became sites of incarceration, where many were executed, but the Dutch Jews were locked up inside of them, and they would then be sent to extermination centres such as Sobibor and even Auschwitz, where they were gassed in the gas chambers. Rauter, inside of Schweningen prison, the very place where he would actually be executed, ordered a special block constructed for prisoners who were locked up indefinitely, and they would not be released. 738 men and 21 women died inside that site, or in the execution field nearby. But he continued to carry out reprisals against the Dutch resistance, and Rauter instigated a rule that for every one Nazi who was killed, there would be 10 Dutch people shot in reprisal, or if a Dutch collaborator was killed, then 3 Dutch people would be shot. As the Allies assaulted Arnhem in Operation Market Garden, Hans Rauter was in charge of his own battalion and forces who were carrying out defensive operations, and he was seen in this role as a skilled commander of groups of soldiers, especially his SS men. But as the Second World War turned against the Nazis, there was a brutal attack carried out upon Hans Rauter. On the evening of the 6th of March 1945, he was travelling near to the village of Versterhove, and the Dutch resistance were planning to hijack a truck that they had found which was travelling nearby. This truck was filled with food that was being sent to the German army, and the resistance wanted the contents of the vehicle to then distribute amongst the suffering Dutch people. However, instead of the truck passing by the forces who were planning the ambush, Hans Rauter's BMW car passed by. The resistance members were dressed in German uniforms, and they jumped out after the car stopped, and a firefight broke out, and the resistance fired upon the vehicle. Rauter was struck by bullets, and he pretended to lie dead. He had been shot in the lungs twice, shot in the jaw, and shot through the thigh, and he lost a lot of blood. To try and attract attention once the ambush was over, Rauter shot his pistol high up into the air, and he was picked up the very next day by a passing group of German soldiers. He was operated upon in hospital and did survive, but remained in hospital until the end of the war. But the Germans executed 117 political prisoners at the site of the attack, 50 prisoners in Camp Amersfoort, 40 prisoners at The Hague and in Rotterdam, all for the attack upon Hans Rauter, brutal reprisal killings. But at the end of the war, Hans Rauter was captured by the British, and they handed him over to the Dutch government to be tried by a special court in The Hague. He denied that he was responsible for any war crimes, but his actions during World War II were undeniable. Because of this, he was sentenced to death on the 4th of May 1948. He tried to appeal this, but this was denied, and on the 25th of March 1949, Hans Rauter was told that his execution would take place today. He was to be shot by a firing squad. He was taken out of Scheveningen prison, where he had committed many of his crimes during the war, and he was walked out to the sand dunes there, where many people had also been executed by his forces during the war. There are different accounts as to how Hans Rauter's execution went. He was led up towards the dunes, and gathered in front of him was a firing squad made up of Dutch soldiers. Rauter was allowed to fall onto his knees and pray before his execution, and it was claimed that after that he put on his gloves and hat. He then went over to the stake which was secured for his execution, and he was tied to it. What was shocking is that allegedly Rauter was allowed to direct his firing squad, and it's claimed that he ordered the firing squad with an unaffected voice, "Fire." The executioners shot straight into their target, and immediately Hans Rauter was killed. When this information got out, there was a lot of controversy in the Netherlands, as they considered that Rauter was given the power to bring his life to an end, ordering his firing squad and then his death. Hans Rauter was a brutal and barbaric Nazi official who throughout the Second World War caused a huge amount of chaos and terror across the occupied Netherlands. He was responsible for the death and slaughter of thousands, and he would meet his justice at the end of the Dutch firing squad years after the war had come to an end. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.